lads, with just me and downtown Stephen Brown. We're going to be touching on all things. He was at the game last night, so you know what? Let's start with that. Your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins Toronto Maple Leafs game last night?
The first two times that the Leafs played the Penguins this season, they did an awful job. The first game, they got absolutely run over and had a awful time managing Pittsburgh speed in transition. And then the second time, I feel like they overcompensated for it and they got shut out.
Yeah.
But in this game, it was the Leafs didn't, contain Pittsburgh speed or anything like that, but they did a good job matching speed with speed, I felt.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the first time was the David Ayersian type game where we played an AHL Pittsburgh Penguins and we lost. That was the first game, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, it was like 7-1 or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 7-1. It was miserable.
So what, I know you're probably just going to get into it there, but what was the main difference in the way that we played? Do you think it's just that as the season has progressed, we've just gotten that much more cohesive as a unit?
I think, well, the one thing that's been pointed out over Twitter that I don't think a lot of people are picking up on is the Leafs have been practicing relentlessly the last month or so. Like when Toronto got that huge snowstorm in the middle of January, they had just come back from a road trip where they played every game in a different time zone and they blew so many multi-goal leads. It was absolutely miserable. They got home and they didn't have a snow day. They didn't have an off day. They practiced.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin McGran, a Toronto Star reporter, I believe, tweeted out that last week marked 9 consecutive days in a row where the Leafs either played, skated, or practiced. And he didn't remember the last time that had happened, maybe going back to when Pat Quinn was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone loves to get on them when they lose, because when they lose, they do lose big. But if you don't think they're working on it, they very much are working on it. And if you're seeing progress from the first Pittsburgh game, and then the second one is a little bit overcompensation, they get shut out. And then in this one, like I said, I felt like they did a really good job matching Pittsburgh's speed, especially in that first period. They came out of the gate absolutely flying, and it made for little lapses later on in the game more tolerable because they were already up 2-0 and then 3-1 afterwards. And then they had scored to make it 4-1 with like 13 minutes remaining in the third period. And then that's when Pittsburgh started to push, and the expected goals and all the other stats, if you look at the box score, are heavily in favor of the Penguins. But right up until when the Leafs scored to make it 4-1, it was a fairly even game. Jack Campbell was playing fantastic, lights out. And it's not even that Tristan Jarry was playing bad. It was just the Leafs had grade A opportunities and they made the most of them.
Yeah, I want to pause to what you said at the start there, just in terms of like when we lose big, everyone gets on them. But honestly, when was the last time that we lost big, right? Because the Calgary game, if you look at the box score, you can say we lost big. But that game, we should have won, right? Like, if anything, it was at least close. It wasn't that we lost big. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then the game after against Vancouver, we absolutely dominated them.
Yeah, like the last time I want to say the Leafs lost convincingly was the game in the middle of January against the Rangers, where they had lost 6-3. Campbell wasn't very good. The defense wasn't very good. And Shesterkin is Igor Shesterkin. Right, you're not going to be able to overcome
against the Leafs, especially. Yeah, yeah. But even that, and I know we can get into like the goalie,
that's a month ago.
Yeah,
right. It's a month ago.
Yeah. So okay. So on Twitter, I got into a bit of a spat the other day, just with there's so many Leaf fans who are still out there who, no matter what we do in the regular season, it will never be enough. And I personally don't see a point in viewing things that way, because what's the point of watching the regular season or being a Leaf fan during the regular season? You might as well just tune in for the playoffs. If the good things are just going to be discounted as regular season, if Marner getting like as many points, like double 2 point per game player in the last month or a couple months, it's just, well, what is he going to do in the playoffs? It's like, you can't just discount all of the good things that that we're doing right now. What are your thoughts on that as a fan who's been through the worst of the worst, just like me?
I mean, I always want to be a little bit more optimistic, and I always will point to those good things, and I will lean on them if it's the regular season or not. But at the same time, I think the frustration that those other people feel, and I think that's the tone that we were getting from the beginning of the season when they started like 2-4-1, is that the criticism was valid. And the criticism when things aren't going well right now is valid, just because the pressure is the highest that it's ever been in this market in like the last 20 years. And what we're seeing with the Leafs when they do lose, even if they do get legitimately goalied like they did against the Canucks, is a valid response, just because that's the way that people are going to feel when they've lost so many years consecutively in the first round, when they haven't won a playoff round in so many years, and when they're looking ahead to the playoffs and they see that they need to go through possibly Tampa and Florida. It's hard. Everyone wants them to be as perfect as they possibly can be, because everyone just wants to see them win. And when they're not, it's frustrating and it's hard.
Yeah.
But both people are right. There's no wrong answer in how you're feeling after a sports game.
Game. Yeah. We are all going through unneeded stress on our bodies and minds in the hopes that one day it'll all be worth it. And, I want to pause you right there, because you said going through Florida and Tampa. I know we haven't seen any of Florida against us this year, and we haven't seen them in a couple of years. I still find it hard to get scared of this team. Tampa, even to me, I view Tampa as like they have the experience. Like Tampa is a damn good team, but I could see the Leafs keeping up with them because we play the same style, and it would be a fun as fuck series. Florida, I really find it hard to get scared of them. Can you, what side are you on in that?
See if Sergei Bobrovsky decides,
right?
Sergei Bobrovsky, but it's like, but I don't know. He doesn't even know.
Yeah.
So it's like you could be facing an 890 goalie or a 940 goalie. Yeah. Nobody knows. This year it's closer to like whatever his numbers are, but he's been better or not. I don't want to say worth the contract, because it's hard to be worth your contract when you're making $10 million and you're a goalie. Like it's just different.
Yeah.
Because you're just expected to steal every game at
like
that
Carey
point.
Price last year's playoffs.
Yeah. That's like the bare minimum at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, he could. I don't know. I'll believe it. I'll believe it if he posts if the Florida Panthers make the first round and they lose and he posts an 890 save percentage. Yeah. I won't have a hard time believing it. Yeah. But the rest of that team is just so good. And they see, like, the Leafs, when people get frustrated with the Leafs for not being physical enough, it's because they don't push back when they are pushed. I'm never expecting them to go out there and be tone setters. That's just not the way this team is. But the Florida Panthers have the ability to play fast and heavy and be those tone setters and push when getting pushed back. But they're also a team in the National Hockey League, and the Leafs are right on their heels if you were to take a look at the standings and sort of by points percentage. So while the Leafs have been very, very good this season, the Florida Panthers have been just that much better. But the same way that you want to doubt our defense, I would doubt their goaltending.
Right. And let's stop right there. You just said doubt our defense. And I wanted to touch on two things. Let's start with who we have on the team now, and then we'll get into possible trade targets, what your recent video was on. But who we have on the team now, just looking at the time on ice, and I know time on ice isn't like the most indicative thing because game flow matters. But Rasmus Sandeen has been talked a lot about recently. There's been articles written about this guy being a top four defenseman. Is he ready to be a top four defenseman with the Toronto Maple Leafs on a competitive playoff team? He finished with the lowest time on ice of defensemen last night under Travis Dermott. What is your vision for Rasmus Sandeen? Do you feel like we could compete with him in the top four, or that could bring us to trade targets where he slots into a more sheltered role?
Well, I think the important thing to point out last night is that he was playing on his offside next to Jake Muzzin, and that pairing did not do anywhere close to well, whether it was the first, second, or third period. And it's just Kyle Dubas said that Rasmus Sandeen was going to get an extended look here and really be given an opportunity to show what he can do. And if they're just going to try him in different situations and stuff like that, we may have to be patient over the next little while. But I don't think that it's indicative of who he can be or who he is just because he's struggling in an unfamiliar role. We know that he can be a fantastic defenseman on their third pair in a little bit more of a sheltered role. I think that he is ready to take steps in his development, but when Jake Muzzin was out of the lineup and it was him and Justin Hall playing on that second pairing, and that's when Justin Hall was playing good for his 2-3 week stretch. And now he's been playing bad for his 2-3 week stretch. You know, it's Jekyll and Hyde pretty much with him, but he did not fare very well against the other team's best players. It really looked like a situation where if you look at the usage, they threw him in Jake Muzzin's shoes and they said, go. And it was a couple of really rough games. Now, that's not to say that if they left him there that he would continue to sink, but I would really like to see him somewhere in the middle of that third pair sheltered defense and being thrown to the wolves in Jake Muzzin's role. So a lot of people want to give Jake Muzzin a hard time, but he plays the most difficult minutes on the team. Yeah, with not a lot of help either.
Yeah, I'm still a Jake Muzzin believer. It's just
so am I.
Yeah, I think most. I feel like it's getting more to 50-50, but I mean, Leafs Twitter is toxic enough anyway. So who the hell?
Just so that I can clarify, I'm not saying that the difficult minutes that he plays is covering up for his play, like it's an excuse. The Jake Muzzin that we know and love is one of the best two-way defensemen in the NHL playing in that type of difficult role. This is a fall from being one of the best two-way guys in the NHL to where he is this season. And I don't know. I don't know.
It's weird to see, like, I don't know, you'd have to go in a deep dive of history to see like the drop off of players and how substantial it is from year to year, or if it's a progressive thing, because it was like the entire time that Jake Muzzin has been here, he's been the same borderline elite two-way defenseman, but then this year he's seemingly dropped off. Is the history of defensemen that it is literally a year, or is that like, is it something else? Like, you know, like, is it something?
I don't want to put too much weight into speculation, and I would never speculate, but we could just say what we know, and that's he was stretchered off the ice in the Columbus series, was injured in the Montreal series. He is 32 right now. He looks slower than I can remember him being. He's getting frustrated out there and pressing a bit and hasn't made the greatest decisions with the puck and carrying it. I don't think that this has anything to, if I had, I don't like to speculate, but if I absolutely had to, sorry, but I don't think that this has anything to do with skill or talent. It is what it is. He's 32 years old. Maybe he can't play every single minute against the other team's best players, with not very much help on the other side there.
Yeah,
you're either going to have to get him some help, or you're going to need to spread those minutes around a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw what happened with even Giordano, who's a lot older than Muzzin, but like, guys had some heavy mileage throughout his career. As soon as Brody left, his numbers seemed to decline. This year, they've declined. So it's like, if you had Muzzin with a guy like a TJ Brody, it might not look so substantial of a drop off. And as we were talking about previous episodes, he might need a bit of a crutch.
There would still be that drop off there, but you can mitigate it
Mask it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, my theory on it is, or not really like a theory, my idea is that everyone wants the Maple Leafs to go out, get a top 4 defenseman. And it's like, okay, fine. The asking price is a first and a third round pick, or it's a top prospect and a pick. or it's a couple of top prospects, and then you're like, whoa. The guys that are available aren't even like, if we were gonna pay that price, I'd like to acquire another Jake Muzzin, please.
Yeah.
And there is not one of those guys available at this year's trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Damon Severson is the closest thing to it, and he has his pros and he has his cons.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you remember the game that the Leafs played the Devils, he's not getting a lot of help out there either, but he has his pros and he has his cons. There is not that sturdy defenseman who's just reliable all the time, like Jake Muzzin was when the Maple Leafs first acquired him. I mean, going the first season that they acquired him, going into the playoffs, I believe he had a bit of a back injury or a shoulder injury or something like that. So it's not just the Montreal series and then the Columbus series. Like, this is gradual. And then now we're seeing it kind of immediate.
So what's cool? But what's cool, I just going to put a positive spin because I always try and do that, is we are in the top 5 best teams in the entire NHL right now. And that is with Jake Muzzin, the guy who plays the toughest minutes out there, being less than Jake Muzzin last year. And we are still the top 5 team. We are 6th in the league, I believe, 5th now in goals against allowed per game. And this is with Jake Muzzin possibly being injured or taking a step back. So, like, what are we, we're complaining about a little bit because we obviously wish we had the Jake Muzzin of old, but that's life. And we got guys like Sandeen who are taking a step up. That's just what happens. Guys take step back, guys take steps up. And we're a good defensive team. Whatever people want to say about us blowing leads or whatever, like, that's a team thing. It's not necessarily a defensive thing. And Campbell hasn't been Jack Campbell recently. And we're still top 5 in the league.
Yeah, like, I mean, they're still a top 5 team since the beginning of the new year. And that includes all those games where they blew all those leads. And they're still a top 3 team since the beginning of November. But you can clearly see where the team needs to get better. And I think that's the frustrating thing throughout this season, is that when they have lost, you can point to very, very specific things.
All right, so let's get into that. What is the very, very specific thing that you would like rectified at the trade deadline?
Well, it's the top 4 defensemen. And like I was saying, like, you hear the asking price of first and a third or a top prospect, and it kind of dazes you for a second because you're like, what? A first and a third for Ben Sherratt? No. First and a top prospect for maybe like 30, 40 games of Josh Manson? I mean, he's good, but no. You're hearing the asking price on some of these guys, even like a John Klingberg who's having a down season. You're hearing the asking price on these guys, and you're like, oh my God. And then you're like, what are we going to do if we don't get that guy? Are you going to panic spend, or are you going to try to be a little bit creative here? And what I've been saying in my videos on my own YouTube channel, Downtown Sports, is I think the better option is to, if you don't want to pay the exorbitant price, is to go out and get a guy who can solidify that third pair with Rasmus Sandeen, so you could elevate his responsibility a little bit. And then at that point, you have Riley Brody, who's been consistent all season long. You have Muzzin and whoever you want to stick next to him, Liljegren, Justin Hall, even somebody else if you want to get 2 guys, I don't know. And then Rasmus Sandeen and someone who can solidify that third pair, and you can spread the love a little bit, and through that, if a guy like Muzzin or a guy like Hall not having a good game, okay, don't play him in that role. You don't have to force it anymore. You can lean on Riley Brody, you can lean on Sandeen and that sturdier presence on that third pair.
So Luke Schenn, Scott Mayfield, Justin Braun, who are some guys that you've been, I know you did a deep dive on Scott Mayfield, but who are some guys that you're talking about that solidifying presence, being potentially a top 4, but being solidifying that third pair at least?
Justin Braun is really interesting just because with guys like Rasmus Ristolainen and Ryan Ellis out of the lineup in Philadelphia, he's been playing on their top pair with Ivan Provorov for an extended period of time right now. So whatever role you would be acquiring him to play in would obviously be a little bit less than that, right? We're not expecting older Justin Braun to fill that sort of role. but the rumor is that he could be had for a mid-round pick, and his salary, I believe, is $1.8 million, and he's a UFA at the end of the season. He's absolutely so boring. I could not tell you what his voice sounds like. I could not tell you what his face looks like. I do not care. I want to never notice him ever. And if that was the case, I would be absolutely thrilled. And that's the type of player that he is. Now, he doesn't move the puck very well. So playing him with Jake Muzzin would be compounding an issue with him maybe not being able to move the puck the greatest or being able to make timely decisions with it. So then you're looking at either breaking up Riley Brody or pairing him with Rasmus Sandeen. And I think that could work out.
Yeah, I mean, what you saw is Zach Bogosian play on a top pairing with Victor Hedman and win the Stanley Cup. So like he seemingly is a little bit in that ilk, right? Where like ideally you want him on like a bottom pair, but if in a pinch, you can play him up in the lineup.
If I'm remembering it correctly, I believe the pairing of Victor Hedman and Zach Bogosian did not allow a goal against in the playoffs when they were on the ice together. When the Leafs had first signed Zach Bogosian, I could be remembering that wrong. It could be like 1 or 2 goals or something like that, but it was something crazy where they didn't allow a goal. I'm pretty sure that's the insane stat.
And I mean, granted, they got to play the Islanders for an entire series, so that helps. But
it does. Speaking of the Islanders, though, you did mention another player there.
Yeah, Scott Mayfield.
Scott Mayfield. And I did a video about him today, so my memory is a bit fresh on it. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. He's signed through the end of next season at $1.4 million. The big question is he available and what would he cost? If you're looking at the Islanders so far this season, they are not going to make the playoffs. But if you were to tell Islanders fans that, they would scream in your face like never say die.
Of course.
Or, you
can have John Tavares. He sucks. He's a second line forward.
Yeah, exactly. They have been killed, died, and come back several times over the last couple of years with all the people that have been doubting them. But they started the season with, like, I think they played 13 consecutive games on the road because their new building wasn't 100% ready. And then they had a bunch of injuries. They had COVID hit them really, really hard. And they got off to a really, really, really slow start. But since the beginning of December, if I can remember from my video, I think they're 13, 10, and 3 and a middle of the pack team. So I don't know if Lou Lamoriello and the rest of the staff there looks at that and considers the first couple of months a one-off and they try to come back next year. And if they do try to come back next year, I can't imagine that Scott Mayfield is a guy that they would want to get rid of. He's playing over 20 minutes a night with Ryan Pulock being injured on their top pair. And has decent chemistry with Adam Pelech, but mind you, Adam Pelech is the driving force on that line. Like, he is absolutely mean that we should discount a player's ability to play well with a good player, because we've seen it in Toronto. You can't just plug anyone next to Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. You can't just plug anyone next to John Tavares and William Nylander. There needs to be some sort of chemistry. There needs to be some sort of a fit. And the fact that Scott Mayfield and Adam Pelech have been able to be so good together is not a knock on Scott Mayfield. It maybe a little bit cause for, like, don't go out and spend the sun and the moon on him. But he's also playing a very, very difficult role there, and he's succeeding in it.
Right. Yeah. Would you have, is there another guy that, once again, you might not have heard too much in rumors that you're kind of like, other than like a Shen, that you're kind of thinking about a little bit, that would be a nice addition to this decor?
Labushkin is another guy that I mentioned in a previous video, who's, I believe, 6'2" and over 200 pounds, throws a lot of hits, blocks a lot of shots. His primary partner this year has been Jacob Chikrin, but he's played a fair amount of minutes away from him, and his numbers are actually better in a harsher defensive role away from him. He's taken a huge step this season in his development in terms of the amount of ice time that he's been playing. He's been right around 18, 19 minutes a night. So he's a guy, and like on that pairing, like if you asked anyone who moves the puck on it, they would tell you Chikrin. And that's a little bit of the worry there, is that he, again, another guy who would be really nice to add to this team, but wouldn't really work well next to Jake Muzzin. And with the way that Keith put the defensive pairings in a blender last night, he didn't break up Riley Brody at all. So I don't think that we can say, oh, maybe you can play Brody with Muzzin. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that Riley Brody's here to stay, and that's just, he's not messing with it.
And no one's upset about that.
No. But if you're pairing a guy like Labushkin with Muzzin, I think that that's a disaster waiting to happen. They're both slow, having trouble moving the puck. I mean, Labushkin never really was good at it anyway. But if you're pairing him with a guy like Rasmus Sandeen, again, if you're looking for that Zach Bogosian type, Zach Bogosian actually provided a little bit more offense than people want to give him credit for. He would jump up and pinch, and he would be a little bit active on that blue line. And he wasn't scared to have the puck on his stick. Doesn't mean that he was good at it, but he wasn't scared to have the puck on his stick. A guy like Labushkin, I would see, like, people were frustrated with a guy like Cody Ceci because he was big for nothing. But like, if Cody Ceci just, I don't know, if he just punched a couple of people in the face and threw some hits and was a little bit tougher in front of his net, I think people would have really liked him.
Yeah.
Not for the offensive reasons. I mean, everyone remembers that point shot that he took in the Columbus series that went like the puck was like tumbling like 20 feet wide of the net.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure you or I could take a better shot from the point than that. And I'm not very good at hockey.
Yeah.
You know, but a guy that doesn't really provide much offensive value, but will throw a lot of hits, will block a lot of shots, has played a bigger role on his team this year. Labushkin making 1.375 or 1.35 and is a UFA at the end of the season. He's also only 27. So like, if you wanted to sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal for maybe a little bit cheaper, not someone that would be a deteriorating asset or on the decline just yet.
Yeah, and let's we'll take a sec from trade talks, because that's all that Leafs Twitter is talking about right now, and I just want to touch on some prospect stuff. And I guess it relates to trade talks, because you keep people. I think this might be more of a layman's Leaf fan perspective, but people are throwing in guys like Nyes, guys like Holmberg, Hervanen, Topi, and they're just like throwing them into trades for Ben Sherrod or for whoever, right? And I think it comes from if you're not like a super fan like us, you might not know about how amazing of seasons and ceilings a lot of these guys have. Whereas like, I'm super excited about Ty Voigt. You know, like, that's a very rare thing in Leafs fandom to be excited for and to even know who Ty Voigt is.
I'm also excited about Ty Voigt.
Right. But I think it's like something where people will just see all these names. They're like, sell high on Topi and stuff like that. And maybe it's just about not knowing what these guys can bring in the future and how important it is to have a model where, if we're trading away picks all the time, that we do have these guys who can come up, play entry-level deals and provide offense, whether it's on the bottom six or slotting them in on the top six. Like, I just don't necessarily like the approach of trading away a couple of these guys for anyone at the trade deadline. What are your thoughts? Would you rather give up draft picks or prospects?
It's weird because the way that the Leafs got these guys is because they flew under the radar, and they continue to fly under the radar, even though they've been awesome, and they're doing so in professional men's league. They're doing so in levels that are a little bit more competitive than, let's just say, CHL hockey. But if they did play in the Canadian Hockey League, if they did play in the OHL or the WHL or the QMJHL, they'd be absolute stars and ripping it up. And a lot of people would see that. It's not anyone's fault. Like, I'm not saying that people do it on purpose or anything. It's just that we're not really exposed to the Finnish league or the SHL or the KHL. Like we don't really get those highlights and stuff like that. Like our media doesn't necessarily cover what's going on there. I couldn't tell you who's the leading scorer in the KHL, the Finnish league, or the SHL.
Right.
But I could waver a pretty good guess at who's leading each Canadian league, you know, just because you hear people talking about them.
Well, and also it's like if you see the stat leaders for the Canadian Hockey League, it'll be like this guy has 3 points per game. If you look at the Swedish Hockey League, the best you're going to get is a point per game player, you know, so it's not as flashy. So you might not know it, like, you know what I mean?
You know, yeah. And I mean, like a guy like Matthew Nyes, who just continues to look like the best player everywhere he goes. I'm not interested in trading him for anything. Yeah. Like I remember there was a trade deadline where Brian Burke came out post deadline coverage, and people asked him, so like, what was going on today? And he was like, well, there wasn't really much available out there, but it was really easy to trade Morgan Riley today. Like the phone was ringing off the hook for Morgan Riley, and it's just like, yeah, of course, but no. And it's the same thing with Luke Shen when he first got here. Yeah, it would have been really easy to trade Luke Shen in his first couple of seasons here, but again, no. Yeah. You don't trade guys like that, and you don't. But the flip side of it also is that you don't sell low on guys either.
Yeah,
we're looking for those in between guys who maybe the Leafs look at them and they say, "Do we have a spot for you in the next 2 or 3 years?"
Yeah, I have a perfect example.
Okay, go ahead.
Jeremy Bracco, 3 years ago.
Right. Like he was a guy. He obviously had other issues as well.
Right, but he was so high up on what was it? Bozak, Bracco, who was it? Brown, Bracco, and a second for whoever in the league. Pick anyone. Crosby.
It was Bracco, Nielsen, and a second.
Yeah.
So just pick any top four defenseman.
Yeah,
and that's should have been it.
Yeah, but that's the guys that you're kind of talking about who are like, if you are going to have a guy who probably doesn't fit in your top six anytime soon, and he's not the type of player that can play in your bottom six like a Pontus Holmberg or Ronnie Hirvonen can, like that's when you kind of want to offload them while their value is high.
Like I'm looking at a Mikhail Abramov or Semyon Jaraginchinstev, or see like a guy like on the higher end of that would be like a Nick Abruzzese, where I hope I'm saying that right, but it's just like he's playing college hockey. I don't know the timeline on him too well, but you know, can he stick at center? And if the answer is no, well then I don't know where is he gonna fit?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's never a problem to have too many good players, but that's when you can kind of make compromises. I'm not saying to give these guys away.
Right.
I'm saying to leverage them to acquire other good players as well.
Yeah, especially a guy like I'm going to say it a different way, just so one of us will get it right. Nick Abruzzes. I'm not even going to say it. Like, what a great Olympics he just had, right? Playing with Matthew Nyes. Like, he had a very good Olympics, and like that's a guy that you can probably sell high on now if you don't see him fitting with the team. So like little things like that, and these are the things that I trust Dubas completely to do, because he's a prospect first kind of guy. You haven't noticed within his history of being Leafs GM that he's traded away prospects. He's traded picks.
He's traded away prospects that he's clearly seen. Okay, we have no use for this player.
Exactly.
Like I remember he traded Fedor Gordeev for like a 5th or a 6th or something like that. And there's a couple of examples of guys like that where there was another. It was Jimmy Vesey's brother, Nolan Vesey, or something like that, where he was just tossed for a 7th because they knew that they either weren't going to be able to sign this guy or they just had no spot for him, and another team was willing to give you a 7th round pick for him. And it's like, okay, cool, we'll try again, you know?
Yeah.
But so there is that history of when guys don't have a spot, they can be included in a deal.
Like Sean Dursey and Carl Grundstrom kind of thing, who probably could have fit in eventually, but like those are guys that he kind of saw as the fringe. And I mean, we got Jake Muzzin out of it, so
like those two players probably on the higher end of that spectrum of, do they have a spot here? Probably, but Jake Muzzin.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. So who are if you had to choose three untouchables from a prospect pool right now, who are your three untouchables?
Matthew Nyes, Topi Naimela, and for a different reason, Rodion Amirov. Not because he's ripping it up and absolutely red hot on fire. It's just there is absolutely no point to trading him right now.
Yeah, low value.
He was
Very
injured.
low value.
He was injured. He was just you can't possibly do that as a general manager and as an organization. Like, hey, like I could be totally wrong, because a guy like Kyle Dubas has also been accused to hanging on to guys like him for too long, not selling high on a Kapanen and not selling high on a Janssen, Dermott for Mackenzie Weegar. There is a time, but I don't think that time is now for Rodion Amirov. I would much prefer to get him over to North America after his team is done in the playoffs, because the KHL moved up their playoffs. They canceled the rest of the regular season, and I would want to see him on North American ice and just healthy.
Yeah.
The guys had a really rough 2021, 2022.
Yeah. And I think also, I just have a bit of a conspiracy with the KHL. He wasn't even really in the KHL this year. I forget what's the under league? Like the AHL to the KHL?
The VHL or the
Yeah,
MHL,
yeah,
it's either one of the two.
Right. So it's one of those things where I don't think they view developing. Well, it's not a conspiracy. They don't view developing NHL prospects at any, like, they don't want to do it at all. And I feel like they probably purposely don't want to do it because
especially when he's already signed the contract with the Leafs.
Right.
Like,
and so
the Leafs allowed him to stay there. I mean, with everything going on, if he's like 19 or 20 years old, like that's the thing. Like, I'm 24 and I was watching the Leaf to Leaf video the other day with Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandeen. Yeah. And their ages popped up on the screen, and I'm like, those guys are both younger than me. And I'm like, I see how stupid and how naive and how just like not focused and shitty I am at times. And it's just like, yeah, these guys are even younger.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not an excuse or anything like that, because expectations are expectations and you need to win now. But at the same time, and then of course with Amirov, it doesn't help that Dawson Mercer's absolutely ripping it up with the Devils. And it doesn't help that Braden Schneider is looking like a big right-handed shot top four defenseman with the Rangers right now. But again, sample size.
Yeah.
Let's like those, obviously right now, yeah, not the right pick. A couple of years from now, maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, and then you just look at the rest of that draft, and Roni Hirvonen is looking amazing. Topi is looking absolutely amazing, third round pick. Ovchinnikov just got signed to an entry level deal to play with the Marlies today, I believe.
He's a really interesting, intriguing player. I'm vaguely remembering the draft video that I did. I remember him being extremely undersized, but very, very skilled, and also not afraid to stick up for himself.
Mm-hmm. And if you noticed in the past, if you look through past drafts, which I do sometimes, just like see like who got the late round picks, right? Mm-hmm. The very often, if you are going to get a gem in the later rounds, it is going to be from Sweden or Russia. It's really the only two places that guys get from, because like you were talking about, the CHL, the OH, like all of these things are so heavily scouted. It's really hard to find gems unless you're looking at the Ty Voits, because there was a COVID lockout last season. So like the Lidstroms, I forget the Russian thing of that, but just a lot of guys like that who kind of fly under the radar, maybe play in lower leagues in Russia and stuff like that. Those are the guys that you're going to be able to go out and get.
With such a high volume of players coming from all the leagues, there's guys that slip through the cracks everywhere. Mm-hmm. But it's always like the Pavel Datsyuks who come from a town of like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
but the Red Wings somehow found him.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one else could, but they did.
Yeah.
So it's things there are players available out, but the challenge is also getting them to come over, right, and making them feel comfortable.
Right.
Like you see a guy who absolutely ripped it up in the KHL, Vadim Shepachov, signed with the Vegas Golden Knights in their inaugural season. He plays like 4 games for them, and Gerard Gallant just goes, no, not interested in this guy.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, we'll never know, or maybe we do, and I just don't know it.
Yeah. And
but it didn't work. It didn't work. Moving across the world is hard. Imagine.
Yeah. Well, especially
Imagine
for
that.
like Ovchinnikov. Like, so I just looked up where he played junior, and it's a place called Novosibirsk, and it's literally in the middle of Russia. Like, you're talking a guy where it's going to be hard to go see junior games in this place. Like, those are the type of guys where, yeah, you're taking a huge chance, because yeah, for someone to travel across the world from a place like that, and also to even be scouted from a place like that, is just so hard. And thank God we have the resources.
He lives in the town over from where Rocky was training in Rocky 5.
Nice. How do you know that?
No. I'm not saying literally. I'm just like a joke.
Yeah. Okay.
Because like you see Rocky on top of the mountain, and he's
yeah, exactly.
And it's like there's no one around him.
Exactly. Yeah. So like those are the type of guys that we should be a little bit excited for. It'll be interesting. We had a podcast with Nick Barden, who I know you went to the Leaf. Was it last night that you guys went together?
Yeah.
And that'll be coming out soon for everyone here. We just had some glitch sometimes, so Mark's gonna have to cut it up into smaller videos and release, unfortunately. But like, it'll be interesting when we go back and forth and getting more and more, when these guys start to sign these deals with the AHL, to see how they play in the smaller ice surface and how they play with grown-ass men like the Rich Clunes of the world. Like, it'll be really interesting as the season progresses in the AHL to see all of these guys. And I'm super excited for guys like Hervin and guys like Topi, guys, maybe Amirov, to sign with this team and just see how they do. It's going to be so cool to see. And that's why I don't want to trade any of them, No,
but like, if a good player is on the table, I can let him go.
Could you let Matthew Nyes go?
For who?
Matthew Nyes.
Throw out a really super unrealistic name.
Chikrin.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just, for people who hate Dubas, like, if anyone's interested, go back and look at the drafts that he's done. Like, he got Pontus Holberg in the 6th round. That guy might be an NHL player. Philip Kral is borderline NHL player. Mac Hollowell is having an amazing season. Nick Abruzzese, I'm going with your pronunciation. Mikhail Abramov looks like he could be a possible fringe bottom guy. Nick Robertson, another 2nd round pick. Vieti Mietinen, who I feel like he's kind of lost in the fray a little bit, but last year, that guy was like, we were really viewing him as someone who could play in the AHL this year.
A really interesting activity is going on. I feel like it's not as much so since last year, but a really interesting activity every once in a while is going to Kyle Dubas's Twitter account and just creeping through his likes. Sometimes he drops some like inspirational or like motivational quotes, and you're like, oh my god, what does this mean? But like, his likes would be Vieti Mietinen scoring. Like he keeps tabs on all of these guys.
Yeah.
And I know he's having a little bit of a slower season this year, but they went all the way to the semifinals or the finals last year or something like that. But you mentioned a guy like Nick Robertson. He's just, you can never say no to him, because he's going to absolutely fight like a bulldog at all times, and he's just going to dog it out there at 120%.
He's my third, by the way, for Untouchables instead of Amirov. I get why you said that, but for me, it's Nick Robertson because of his mindset. Guys like that don't come around very often. Right from birth, the guy had a tough go. Like, that's a guy that I want on my NHL team in the future.
That guy, it may not be right now, but it will happen.
Yes,
it will.
Yeah,
it's going to.
He's going to make sure it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that, I mean, his recent quote talking about, Mark and I touched on it yesterday, was just like, "Oh, I'm going to get called up." Like that's what, you know.
I love that. I love that too. I love that too.
Yeah, a lot of guys will play the political answer, like, "Hey, if it works out, and if I put like my all into it," and he's just like, "No, I'm gonna be called up. That's the goal. I'm gonna be called up." It's like some 5'8", 5'9" guy playing with like 6'5", a bunch of 6'5" guys. He's like, "No, I'm gonna be called up, and I'm gonna be a productive part of the Toronto Maple Leafs." It's just, I don't want that guy going anywhere.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on before we head this thing off?
When's the next game?
Tomorrow against St. Louis.
All right. Don't really have anything too interesting to pull from that. I mean, Adam Brooks got claimed off of waivers after they claimed him, and that looked like a situation where they were kind of maybe unsure of the rules, where there might have been a situation where they could have claimed him and sent him straight to the Toronto Marlies because they had owned him originally, like to begin the season. But the wording of the rule kind of suggests that only Montreal would have had that sort of luxury to do. But I think their plan is that because there's not very many teams who are above them in the standings, that no one below the Leafs in the standings placed the claim on him, and that's why they were able to claim him off of waivers. And then they figured that if they put him on waivers again, because no one else submitted a claim, that all he had to do was clear through another 4 or 5 teams, and they could have had center depth for the Toronto Marlies.
Well, and not only that, this is another thing that Mark and I were talking about, where it's just like, this is the kind of little stuff that I like that Dubas does, because I'm sure that Adam Brooks was so pleased to be back home in Toronto. And those are the little things where it just builds that, like, even if it's not going to move the needle, even if he never plays another game for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he'll be playing at home in Toronto on the Toronto Marlies. And the little things like that of Dubas just saying, "No, I'm going to bring you home," it's just like nice things that you want to see from a GM.
Well, technically, he is home right now in Winnipeg. He's from Winnipeg, and his family is absolutely floored.
No, we don't. Also, Winnipeg fans, how does it feel?
The Jets tweeted out like a welcome video.
How does it feel to take a guy
that tweeted out a welcome video for a guy that they claimed on waivers?
Yeah.
But it's just, no, hold on a second. The Vegas Golden Knights placed a player on waivers. Nobody below the Toronto Maple Leafs in the standings wanted him. The Leafs claimed him. They put him on waivers the very next day, and another team is just like, "We want him instantly."
Yeah. And of course it's Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Of course it's Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have fun with guys that can't even make the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I do.
The reason why I brought that up is because Liljegren should be back up with the team.
Right. Yeah. And that's because he was starting to play better and better. I really want to see what Liljegren has before we do make a deal, which would likely put him out of the starting top 6. So I really want to see what he has in the next little bit. I also just want to touch on the next little stretch of games we have. This is a very dominating potential next 10 games that the Toronto Maple Leafs have. We play the Blues, then we play the Canadiens, the Blue Jackets, the Wild, the Red Wings, Capitals, Sabres, Canucks, Blue Jackets, Kraken, Coyotes, Sabres. So I would not put it past the Toronto Maple Leafs to go on a little bit of a winning streak here, or at least have another November. Yeah, because that is
it's a very like, just looking ahead even further, it's going to be a very interesting last week of the regular season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know that's jumping way ahead, but they got the Lightning, the Panthers, and the Capitals, and then the Red Wings, and then the Bruins.
Yeah.
So the stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4 of these 5 games are going to be absolute dogfights right before the playoff starts.
Perfect.
Which,
and who knows?
Yeah, which is perfect.
And it might actually be a dogfight in the standings too between those 3 teams, right? And maybe even the Bruins, right? So that'll be oh man, I cannot wait. What's gonna happen when we go to the playoffs is we are gonna be going to Maple Leaf Square, and we're going to be fucking cheering on the Toronto Maple Leafs all together, and we're going to win a first round, then we're going to win a second round, then we're going to win a third round, then we're going to win the Stanley Cup.
Whoa. Let's just get to the trade deadline first.
No,
let's get to the trade deadline. If they give up a first round pick for Ben Sherrod, it goes nuclear right now.
Yeah,
all the jerseys come off the wall, everything. No, obviously
that can't
not
happen.
that serious, but
that can't happen. If Dubas is truly on Twitter, like you're saying, and he sees what people think, he will know that he will be fired the next day if that trade happens. No one in Leafs fandom want. Okay, I shouldn't say no one, but please don't get Ben Sherrod. Please don't get Ben Sherrod unless it's for a third.
I respect the skill set, just not for a first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and people are throwing in a lot more than a first for Ben Sherrod. So that's it for us here. We're gonna do a post game tomorrow night after the St. Louis game, and then we're gonna try and get more and more content after a little bit of a break. But for everyone who hasn't listened to it and want to know more about the potential Scott Mayfield deal and what it would look like, check out your video on Downtown Sports because it goes a lot more in depth than we just did. And yeah, everyone like, subscribe. And we'll see you next time.